Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the fallout within the Tory party after the two bruising by-election defeats in which the party is behaving like it's just lost the general election, rather than trying to gear up for it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So, in the wake of the latest by-election defeats for Sunak, a number of Tory MPs are calling for radical changes of policy. Now, I've discussed before how this is self-defeating for them. The reason Reform UK are taking votes from the Tories isn't because the Tories aren't enough like Reform UK, it's because they keep giving them free publicity. The Tories should have kept quiet about any policy area which isn't going well for them, which is basically all of them, but also one which gives Reform UK something to shout about. Remember, just a few years ago, Reform UK were nowhere in the polls. They were UKIP levels, and UKIP are a spent force. The Tories should have deprived them of the oxygen of publicity for any culture wars Reform was stronger than the Tories on. They should have recognised that the Tories have only gained from distractions with immigration talk in the past because they were the only show in town. The rise of UKIP should have taught them important lessons, but maybe because Labour kept letting them off the hook over the last decade or so, the Tories still thought they'd be the default choice for the anti-immigration votes. They could have nobbled GB News. At the very least, they should not have allowed their own MPs to appear on, let alone work for, a media outlet dedicated to a serious rival for their votes. GB News is the media outlet for Reform UK. Frankly, a ruthless and immoral Tory party, as we consider them, would have told Ofcom to hound them out of existence. Yet the Tories didn't actually need to apply dirty tricks. They just needed to stop Ofcom doing GB News special favours. That would have dealt with most of the issues. I've made it clear. I think Sunak and his advisors are as thick as mince when it comes to the political arena. They haven't got a clue. But even to someone as cynical as myself, it is a source of genuine amazement that the Tories have clearly told Ofcom to do GB News special favours, as if an unconstrained GB News is somehow good for the Tory party. It's absolutely terrible for them. But even these calls from within the party to be more like Reform UK and radically change their policies, do they think nothing through? For example, Tories across their membership are happy to keep saying, oh, Labour have got no plan. Labour have no plan, Why do they do this? Because if they can convince voters that it's true, then those voters may think, well, Labour will be no better than the Tories, so why not stick with the devil That's the whole point of that strategy. So if the idea of presenting Labour as without a plan, despite of evidence to the contrary, if that appeals to them as an electoral strategy, why on earth do they want those same voters to believe that they themselves have no plan? After all, if you keep changing your policies, or even arguing that you should drastically change your policies, then it does sort of give the game away you don't have a plan yourselves, or at the very least, that your own MPs have no confidence in the plan. And this is why Labour's green investment change the other week, that was such a risk. And that wasn't a drastic change of their entire policy suite. Just the fact that they were making any major change in election year was potentially unwise. Normally you would go, oh, that's not a good idea. But they got away with it, partly down to presentation, partly down to Rishi Sunak making an even bigger arse of himself. And these swivel-eyed loons that want Sunak to change policies, they want him to change policies on taxation, immigration, public services, welfare, as well as to withdraw from all human rights laws. I mean, even if we forget for now that they might actually end up with 4 seats if that lot went into their manifesto, just the fact that what the public sees is the Conservative Party arguing very loudly amongst themselves as to what their policies should even be. This is how a major party behaves when it's just lost an election. Our policies fail to convince the public. Let's go through them all again and make radical changes. A review at the very least is how you proceed after a loss, and it's quite common for political parties to actually completely melt down, but you don't do this a few months before the actual election when you need your manifesto basically to be ready to go and your MPs to be singing the same tune. I mean, it's hard enough for Sunak to claim he has a plan when the country keeps obviously crumbling. But it's impossible when his own party is saying, yeah, it's a crap plan, we need to start for the whole thing from scratch. One Nation Tories, these are the ones that you'd sort of say on the centre-right mostly, they're calling for unity. They've got no chance. As far as the far right are concerned, it's their fault that their own idiots were deposed, and so calls for unity are perceived as acts of hypocrisy. Oh, well, where was your unity when Liz Truss or Boris Johnson were in charge then? So they've got no chance at all. It would still seem that Sunak is not facing any immediate threat to his leadership, although I'll discuss reports on that later today. But it is now impossible for Tory MPs to believe that they stand much chance in the election, with Sunak insisting that he carries on doing what he's doing. He did this after the last local elections last year. They got absolutely spanked, and worse than expected. They said, oh, we expect to lose 800 seats. And even that, you know, we knew that they were over-egging it. They actually believed they'd lose fewer. They lost over 1,000. So it was worse than even their expectation management suggested. And after it, Sunak said, oh, this is a message we should carry on doing what we're doing. And you go, you what, mate? But the fact that he's still doing it now, in election year, after two thumping by-election losses, but one in particular, which is like pretty much the worst by-election loss the Tories have ever had. What? Sunak and his strategists insist that their own internal polling, oh, you haven't seen this internal polling, it goes to a different school, but their own internal polling suggests that they are finally cutting through to the public. This, as I say, after one of the worst by-election defeats the Tories have known in post-war history, and public polling saying, yeah, that's not right. Now, in saying this, Sunak is basically letting his own MPs know that he isn't going to do anything different. He's basically saying our plan is actually working. We've got data that shows our plan's working. So, of course, he's not going to change it. Except, of course, it's much more likely that he just thinks he's in a position of strength. Most Tory MPs know replacing him will just make things worse. That gives Sunak the green light to do whatever he wants. Because it's like, oh, you're not actually going to replace me, are you? You know, so he can keep talking crap. He can keep trying to work out how to get Hunt to present a budget which makes his family as wealthy as possible. I mean, Sunak will want the tax cuts as much as some of those on the far right. And if Sunak is still planning an election in May, as I believe he is, then he can be even more confident. Because, you know, that would mean calling the election in just over 5 weeks' time. No way there'll be any mobilisation against him in that time, from what I can tell. And so is it any wonder that Tory MPs are behaving as if they've already lost? But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.